I'm joined on set by Nicholas Dungan, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Welcome to the programme. Thank you very much for being here. How much of a setback are these results for Trump? What kind of upper hand, if any, does it give the Democrats?
It gives the Democrats actually more of a lower hand than an upper hand, because they're not really in a position to propose anything or to get anything done. But what they can do is two things. They can stop him getting things done, and we don't really know what his domestic agenda is except dismantle Obama's agenda and to build the wall. Neither of those things will be as easy as it was. The wall won't get built because under the American system, which doesn't, I think one of the things we need to understand and remember about the American system is it's different from everybody else in the world. What looks the same is actually different. So the Senate, for example, has the power to approve ambassadors, to approve, as we saw with Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court justices. Those sorts of things will still be easy. But the purse strings are held by the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives and the Senate all have different committees on different subjects, as is the case in other countries. So the first thing is that a Democratic House of Representatives can block initiatives that Trump might want to take where he would require a majority of the House and the Senate to get legislation through. And don't forget that in the United States, there isn't a government. There isn't a government with ministers. The Congress is the government. So laws are initiated in the Congress and voted by the Congress. But the other thing they can do, and which is going to be very amusing to watch and will keep the media fully occupied for the next couple of years, is that they're going to throw as many banana skins at Donald Trump as they possibly can in terms of investigations and in terms of subpoenaing his tax returns, which he probably won't give, which means that it will then have to go through the courts. So it will be the usual sort of, governmental circus that we see in the United States, where there are checks and balances for absolutely everything. And the whole idea was that that radical things shouldn't happen, and the probability is that radical things won't happen. However, the Democrats are going to have to be careful because, as you said, Trump, well, the Republicans, anyway, have, whether it's Trump himself or not, it remains to be seen, but the Republicans have gained probably a couple more seats in the Senate, which is a totally different type of election. Let's not forget that there are 2 senators per state, even the states such as Montana, Wyoming, or Rhode Island, which have very small populations. There are 2 senators for California and New York. So these are totally different types of decisions, political decisions that voters are making. But so in any case, the fact of having a Republican majority in the Senate will mean, on the one hand, that Trump might be able to get things through, but on the other hand, it gives the senators the opportunity to, within the Republican Party, to mount their own opposition to Trump, which in the last 2 years they haven't done at all. An example, and one which is going to be very interesting to watch in 2020, is Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney was a candidate for the presidency. He's also a billionaire, as is Trump, and he is now a senator from Utah. And he will be an internal source of opposition within the Republican Party to Trump over the next 2 years. So we're going to see the effect of a Democratic Congress. And the Democrats have really constituted themselves as a party of opposition. They rallied around Barack Obama, but his election was more the election of an individual than a platform or a program. And it was the election of, I think like Barack Obama, I'm social democrat, I'm from the coasts, I'm, maybe not limousine liberal, but definitely left of center. I'm very liberal in the American sense on social issues and that sort of thing. But there's no leadership on the Democratic side right now. So the fact is that the Democrats, until they have a candidate, which I think they might, but until they have a candidate, they won't be able to do much except oppose and block. And indeed, I believe that there may be internal opposition within the Republican Party to Trump in these last 2 years, particularly if people, because let's not forget that his popularity ratings are exceedingly low. His base is exceedingly solid, but his popularity is exceedingly low in the country. It's very high with his base, but it's very low in the country by historical standards. So if the Republicans start to think that they would lose the 2020 election, which is only 2 years away,
Yeah, it's
right?
not
Which
long.
means the campaign's only 1 year away. If they start to think they would lose the 2020 election, there'll be internal opposition to Trump within the Republican Party, as well as external opposition to Trump from the Democrat House of Representatives.
So
A
this
long
could
answer
create
to a
even
short
more
question, but it means
division.
that life could be more complicated for him than it looks right, the day after
On
the
the
election.
surface, right. Well, these results confirm a historical trend that the party not in power makes gains in the midterms. But was it really the blue wave that everyone was talking about?
Oh, no, not at all. And I think that for once the pollsters got it right. Mind you, also, the pollsters in the United States, I mean, this is not a living or something they do. It's a career. Right? It's a profession. It's a whole business segment, right? So
Yes.
they ought to get it right. And the other thing is that in the U.S., polling is like the elections. It's not down to the state or even the county. It's down to the street and even the house on the street. And, the pollsters can tell you whether the cashier at the supermarket, in aisle number 2 is going to vote Democrat and in aisle number 3 is going to vote Republican, and why, because that's how far they drill down. So the pollsters were right. But so there is no blue wave. Look, basically what you're looking at is you're looking at two different things that are manifestations of the same thing. One is culture wars within the United States. Okay? You're looking at two completely different American societies. And also, you'll see that there are only 2 Republican states that are not in the Old South. Where do we see the Republicans? Where there's a shoreline, where there's an ocean. We see it in the Old South, we see it in Florida, and we see it in Texas. Right? And even with Cruz, Texas may be moving more Democrat. The East Coast and the West Coast, the East Coast north of the Old South and the West Coast are completely blue, and the colors are also reversed in the United States, which means that the left is blue and the right is red. Mm-hmm. So so they're the Democrats. So, these are people who think completely different about life, who think completely differently about life, who lead completely different lives. And essentially the blue wave is never going to reach some of the states in the middle. And if you look at all the states that are landlocked are Republican. All the states that are not open to the world are Republican. Right? So you've got this geographical split, you've got a cultural split, and you have something beyond the culture wars. You basically have a clash of civilizations, which we're seeing in Europe. France, up till now, where we are, has been exempt from that phenomenon simply because Macron rode, thankfully, roughshod over Marine Le Pen in the last election. But we know, for example, that Bannon is working very hard with a number of European countries and a number of European parties.
He's talking into a lot of European ears at the moment.
And we know that Bannon is working very hard with what he calls the movement to try to create a right-wing, populist, nationalist wave in the European elections, in the European parliamentary elections next May. So this phenomenon that we're seeing in the United States may not be confined to America. We see populism elsewhere. We see it in Brazil. We see it in the Philippines. We see it in Hungary. And we see it in other places in Europe. Right? And so we've got a divided government, maybe divided parties within that government in the U.S., we've got a divided society in the United States, but we also have a divided society in the world. And what the meaning of these midterm elections for the rest of the world is basically going to be that the division in the United States gets worse. It can't get better, right? And since it can't get better, it's not just going to stay the same. So Trump's going to do what he wants. There's going to be constant opposition, and these culture wars will actually, because people don't talk to each other in the United States anymore, and in the post-war period that we're all so romantic about, right? Senators and representatives from both parties had dinner together. They had drinks together. There was a presidential historian yesterday on TV, and she was talking about this: the fact that that the political class was united. The political class and the society are now very divided, and that, it seems to me, although we're not going to see much in the way of American leadership in the next couple of years, we may find that the United States is also emblematic of a more global phenomenon.
Okay, thank you very much for shedding some light, sort of analysing what went on yesterday.
Not beautiful, bright light, but there it is.
Those were your words. Nicholas Dungan, thank you very much for that, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council.